Hey guys, welcome to my first episode, at least, of Dweeb Reviews Invincible. This is going to be a solo review by myself. I'm going to stick with it through every episode of this first season of Invincible, the animated superhero show that just came to Amazon Prime. So I'm really excited about this particular show because I don't have any foundational knowledge or background knowledge of the Invincible comic. It's one of the few comics that I have just passed over, not paid attention to, despite that it had a cult following. I had started to hear that Invincible was a very, very good comic worth paying attention to and worth getting into about a couple years ago when it was still too far already having progressed. I think it was, over 100 issues in. I'm actually not sure on the total amount of issues of Invincible. I know that the comic has concluded now, but it was to a point where I would have been spending $600, $700 to get into the comic series and then having to read through hundreds of issues. And around that time, I was actually willing to make that transition, but it turned out that I found out that Amazon was doing an animated show, and I wanted to wait for the show to maybe kind of watch the show. Now, this is a comic or a show now that is originally conceptualized by Robert Kirkman, the creator of The Walking Dead. And this, paired with The Walking Dead, are his two major claims to fame. I'm really excited about it. I've just watched the first episode. This will be a review of that first episode. I'm going to walk through using some notes that I have to kind of recap and go through the episode, give my thoughts and ideas on it. But overall, greatly impressed by the performances, the animation, and the overall story of this first episode. I cannot wait to get into the second episode. And then, although I think the first three have dropped now with this initial weekend of release, I'll be continuing on a weekly basis after that. And trying to pump these episodes out pretty quickly, too. And this is just something new that we're trying for the channel, for Dweeb Culture. In addition to our group reviews, right now we're doing a group review, of Falcon and Winter Soldier. Please check that out if you haven't checked it out already. Myself, Michael, or Cole might be breaking off to do individual reviews of different things. Invincible really called to me. I had the time for it, and that's why I'm breaking it down right now. So we're going to start at the beginning of the episode. The beginning of the episode starts with two security guards outside of the White House. They're having a conversation with each other, and it seems to betray a little bit of the world that this universe is set in. The first security guard says to the other security guard, talking about upcoming training and kind of his inability to accept the necessity for this training, understanding that the training is designed to prepare them for like alien threats and these great existential threats that are beyond just a crazy dude jumping the fence to kind of go into the White House. He talks about kind of the transition from the old style of training to the new style of training, and it very quickly shifts from the first character's complaints about the training to the second character's personal life and his interaction with his stepson. And it goes so far into this conversation that for a moment I got a little lost in the fact that this was a superhero show or comic that it's based off of. Getting sucked into kind of a very realistic depiction of a stepfather finding a bond with his stepson, something that actually hits close to home for me. But anyways, breaks into an action scene that's very action-packed that also tells us a lot about this world. So two clones, blue guys, lab created, I'm expecting. I believe they were called the Miller twins or Moeller twins. I actually don't have that note written down. Break onto the campus of the White House, armed, heavily superpowered, and just immediately dominate an assault on the White House. We see these crazy turrets pop out from the top of the White House, firing down upon them, and the bullets are ricocheting off their body like nothing. There is a scene that immediately leads up to you believing that one of these two security guards that we just watched, that we're now forming a bond with, is going to get brutally murdered by one of these twins. But the Justice League analog in the form of the Guardians of the Globe immediately come on the scene, start to attack these two clones and protect the White House. And they seem effective at what they're doing. Now, myself, I got the impression immediately that this was a group that was operating with the intent of gaining public notoriety or public clout and acclaims for their actions to save the White House. I can't really say specifically what gave me that impression, but it becomes clear during the course of this fight that these are all genuine superheroes. And don't get me wrong, they are an analog in almost every way for the Justice League. There's a Wonder Woman-like character, there's a Batman-like character, there's a super strength Superman-ish character. I mean, obviously there's another Superman-like character that's going to be introduced very shortly. There is a intangible green character that you kind of get the feeling is a mixture of Green Lantern and Martian Manhunter, because there's, of course, another character that almost looks exactly like Martian Manhunter, and a Flash character called Red Rush. And I think Darkwing was the Batman character, Red Rush was the Flash character. I don't actually know or have notes for the other characters' names. They didn't really focus on that too much, but it's obviously a Justice League analog. And this is actually a tactic that another show on Amazon Prime, interesting enough, uses. The Boys on Amazon Prime follows a series of superheroes that are essentially a Justice League analog. When we talk about superheroes, we know the Justice League is kind of the A-tier, top-class superhero group. Yes, the Avengers is very popular now because of the MCU and its success, but if you look back through time, the Justice League is the most popular superhero group. Hands down. It's the most archetypical, it's the most consistent with what we think of when we think superheroes. So, The Boys has a Justice League analog in the form of their superhero group, with even an evil Superman with the exact same powers as Superman. And this show, Invincible, seems to immediately start off with the Guardians of the Globe, which is another Justice League analog. I like this scene. There's a lot of good action. The clones get defeated. The White House gets saved. And Omni-Man, who is obviously going to become a very important character in this show, gets introduced. Omni-Man, the father of our main character, who we will soon find out, essentially is Superman. I mean, we haven't seen laser eyes, but flight, super strength, super speed, and seems to be on par with no other. The actions of the Guardians of the Globe that I'd mentioned very briefly that betray that they have an actual authentic, heroic sort of disposition is really demonstrated by Darkwing, who is using his tech gadgets to kind of hold up a tank that's crushing him and an innocent woman, and decides to sacrifice his own life to protect the innocent woman before Omni-Man saves his life. Great scene. Really kind of redirected me from thinking, these guys are just doing this for clout, to, they're actually heroes, pretty quickly with just that scene alone. But there is a brief exchange, or I should say lack of exchange, between Omni-Man and Darkwing, where Omni-Man rescues Darkwing and Darkwing does not thank him. And that's where you get your first kind of impression of, I guess Omni-Man's not a part of this group, and for some reason there must be some sort of beef or some sort of conflict between the Guardians of the Globe and Omni-Man. And then we don't think about it anymore because it moves away from that scene. We get introduced to Mark Grayson, voiced by Stephen Ewan from Walking Dead, funny enough. And immediately, he's a pretty likable character. I believe there's a conversation between him and his mother about what the plans are for that day. His father, Omni-Man, also known as Nolan Grayson, comes back home. There's the scene of him kissing his wife and them getting intimate and then talking about it being intimate in front of their son, 17-year-old Mark Grayson, which obviously awkward situation for him. There's a great dynamic about them leaving all the way to Europe for like a lunch together. So you get the feeling immediately that Mark Grayson, who is the son of Omni-Man and a civilian woman whose name is Debbie, I believe. Debbie Grayson, you get the feeling that this is a happy home. There's not really issues of abuse or struggle or difficulties or anything of that nature. It seems to be a happy home with a happy life. And there are the brief conversations about Mark wanting his powers and not having them yet. And I believe the brief conversation between Omni-Man, or the brief mention from Omni-Man to his son, that his race, his people, typically have their powers by the age that Mark is, or like very shortly after the age that Mark is. Immediately after, we follow into a scene where Mark's pretty down about not having his powers. He goes to school. When he's at school, he gets annoyed when he sees this character, Todd, right? The typical jock character, start to kind of harass and bother a character named Amber, I believe. And Mark confronts Todd, and Mark loses, essentially, to Todd, as Todd immediately attacks him. To the point that Mark gets rescued because Amber delivers a swift kick to the nuts from Todd right from behind, which kind of floors him. Understandably for our male watchers. Mark kind of struggles with the fact that he doesn't have powers. There's the introduction of his best friend there that's, well, we don't really actually get too much about his best friend other than that he's a homosexual male. And he seems to be kind of a comic relief character. I mean, I don't remember the exact lines that he was saying, but I remember giggling or at least smiling at the very least to the conversation that they were having. But you understand kind of Mark is a character that is definitely not in the cool kids club as far as his popularity within school. But he has friends. He has a job. He has a loving family. By no means are we led to believe that this kid is a loser. He just got picked on by this one particular bully jock for doing the right thing, for seeing a girl that he believed to be unfairly targeted and standing up for her, which is something very relatable for us. It then flashes over to, I believe, him at his job. And there at his job, when he's taking out the trash, he works for some sort of restaurant. He throws the first bag of trash in and struggles greatly, and then throws the second bag of trash into space, completely into space, which was funny. It was funny because, I think we expected, obviously, that his powers were going to manifest, but very funny way of introducing his powers manifesting. There was no sudden change, big boom, big transformation. It was just, this is heavy. Now it's not heavy. Throw all the way off into space, like I said before. And the moment that he does this, it's obvious to him, yes, my powers have kicked in. That night, he gets home. He tells his parents that his powers have appeared. His father offers to give him training, and he cannot wait for that training. He's waiting up in bed. He decides, to heck with it. I'm going to just figure this out on my own. Climbs out of his second-story window onto his ceiling and tries to fly. And there is a brief scene a little bit earlier in the show where he does try to fly on his front porch and the mailman gives him a dirty look. And it just kind of gives you an impression of who Mark is. Mark obviously already knows that his father's a superhero. He already knows of his own alien lineage and his disposition to get the same powers that his father has, or similar powers that his father has. We are seeing that he's been looking forward to this for a long time. We actually see in a little bit later of a scene when he's first told about his father's alien heritage and his own predisposition to obtaining superpowers. But we do see that when he reveals to his father that he's finally unlocked his powers, his father doesn't seem particularly impressed or excited. And I think that's something we're going to talk about a little bit later on in the episode too. When Mark goes to explore his powers, he starts with flying. That's the power he's been looking forward to the most. That's the power that's most appealing to him. And he takes off, and he can't control it. He flies all the way into space, loses air, passes out from the loss of air, falls back to Earth, does not wake up on the descent, and instead smashes into the ground. And I think this is where we find out what Mark's greatest power is, which is the name that he later gives to himself. He fell from orbit to the asphalt. He's invincible. Nothing can hurt him. He's impervious to damage. Maybe he'll live forever. We don't really know at this point. There was a brief scene where, he almost hits a plane when he's flying. But overall, that unconsciousness and fall from his first attempt at flying is really the big takeaway from this. The next day, and this was something that I was a little surprised about, Mark's father seems to be aware of his late night flying session because of his tiredness and not because of the, crater in their front yard from where he collided with the ground. But he addresses his tiredness in the late night flying session, and then Omni-Man takes Mark on his first actual training day. The training day does not go particularly well, with Mark having a real difficult time landing from their flying lessons. And finally, it ends with this scene that's a little uncomfortable, which is where Omni-Man wants to prepare Mark to be ready for the dangers that'll come with him actually assuming the role of a superhero. And I understand the purpose of this as a father myself. He wants him to understand, hey, this isn't all fun and games. I know you have powers, and you think you might be untouchable, and against the average villain, you probably are impervious. But we're talking about life and death circumstances where you are putting yourself on the line. And he punches Mark, and he punches Mark hard in the stomach to the point that Mark gets the air knocked out of him, reels over, and is actually complaining about the pain. As a father myself, I really connected with this because there's times when you're going to tell your kids that they have to do something or put your kid in a circumstance that you know is a good learning experience from them. But also, as a parent, you want to do everything you can to stop any pain from coming their way, any discomfort from coming their way. You want to give them the best possible life that you can out of love and out of like a parental duty. And you kind of see that with Omni-Man here as he punches Mark hard and Mark's reeling in pain, and he tells him the purpose of what this punch was and kind of apologizes to him. And later on, I think he actually regrets the action that he took. Obviously, which he discusses in the next scene, when they return back home, Omni-Man makes it clear to his wife, to Debbie, that he's really stressed about Mark obtaining powers. That he kind of hoped that Mark would never obtain powers. And that something is changing in the dynamic of the relationship because Mark has obtained powers. I personally feel that this is going to have a link to the end of the episode and that crazy reveal that happens at the end of the episode, but we'll talk about that when he gets there. At school the next day, Todd, that same bully, threatens Mark again. There's that scene where he's punching Mark as hard as he can, and Mark does a very good job of controlling himself. It would be easy to show off in front of all the students of the school and just slam Todd down and win that fight. And instead, he just says, hit me, dude. Hit me as hard as you can. Give me all you got. Todd tries, and his punches get less effective as he's striking, until he hurts his own hand on Mark without actually causing any reaction from Mark whatsoever, and runs away scared, essentially. And that is a great character building moment for us, because we get to see the person that Mark is, and we don't yet, anyways, have to deal with the immaturity that comes with being 17 years old and any possible bad decisions that may sway us and sway our opinion on Mark. So far, our opinion on Mark is, this is a good kid. He's developing powers. He wants to do the right thing, and he's executing them the right way so far. Mark creates a makeshift superhero costume, decides he's going to get well into superheroing. Like his second day with powers, which is utter nonsense. Essentially, it's his first full day with powers. He trained with his father, and then the next day. So, his second day of powers. And he immediately, superhero suit, I'm going to start a bank robbery, and one of the villains is a super-powered villain. Like a rock skin, big, strong type. And we're kind of getting a feeling now, okay, superheroes are not uncommon in this world. We have the Guardians of the Globe. We have this random villain hired by bank robbers. And Mark gets into a fight with him. Mark ultimately wins the fight. But it causes a lot of damage in the act of it. Omni-Man shows up soon after, immediately takes Mark for a kind of like a second training day. Mark asks Omni-Man to hit him. He had overheard what Omni-Man said to his mother about not being ready, not wanting his son to have powers. He wants to prove his father wrong. And there's kind of a touching moment between father and son, and you kind of understand, okay, hey, Omni-Man actually really cares about his son. Yeah, they're both kind of working through some things. You still get the idea that maybe Omni-Man's alien heritage kind of bringing some extra baggage into this relationship than what is immediately on the surface. There's definitely something deeper there that we're kind of just estimating about right now. But it moves into the next scene where, to cheer his son up and to kind of show his son that he supports him in his decision to be a hero, Omni-Man takes Mark to a tailor. And this tailor is a tailor by day and also a tailor by night. But essentially a superhero tailor that deals in, I guess, regular suits and then also super suits that are indestructible. He uses a pre-existing suit that he modifies to kind of fit Mark. Mark mentions that his little homemade suit had goggles, which really helped in keeping the wind out of his eyes. And then that's about all we get, because the tailor says that Mark needs to decide on a name and a theme before he can really go any further in developing what he calls an iconic suit to make Mark kind of an iconic hero, which is what every superhero wants. That tailor, by the way, Art Rosenbaum is the name, is actually voiced by our favorite Mark Hamill, Luke Skywalker, the Joker. Yeah, so really cool to see him in here. You know, a lot of times with these animated shows, use voice actors that you will recognize from other animated shows, video games, anime, things like that. There's a lot of bleed over. But, you know, Mark Hamill obviously is so dear to our dweeby hearts. It's just cool to see him on the show. I like it. There's a scene now where Mark is training outside, tearing up the yard. His mother kind of interacts with him about, hey, don't do this. I'm still your mother. And Mark tries to play the kind of, well, I'm invincible now, maybe I don't have to listen to you thing, but quickly gets kind of shut down by his mom, which I appreciated. It's understandable that a 17-year-old act like that. It's respectable and still keeps the audience's attention and affection by having him back down and just recognize that his mother's his mother and not be a punk about suddenly having superpowers for too long. He only has this one little moment of being a punk and then kind of corrects it from there. There is another scene where Mark speaks with his father, and he has a light bulb moment as as Omni-Man describes to Mark that he's essentially invincible now. And that's where you get the, hey, I am invincible. That's my new name. Flies right back to the tailor, gets that name, or tells him that name, and then is given his new suit. It immediately progresses now to Mark's a superhero. I mean, he's a superhero. He's flying across the city. Part of the building blows up. He goes and fights this like cyborg arm villain. Just dominates him in this fight. And proclaims, I'm invincible. Finally, this is, I mean, we're talking about this being like 45 minutes, 48 minutes of this show. Just so you all understand, at this point in the show, I'm watching it, I'm like, all right, cool. You know, this is very traditional superhero origin. I like the dynamic that it's not an orphan or somebody with a struggled childhood. It's just a kid that wants to live up to his superhero father's legacy. And I'm kind of wondering in the back of my head why Amazon has this rated 18 years or older. Because so far, we haven't even seen a curse word. It's just gone through 45 to 48 minutes of this entire show with a pretty normal superhero, superhero story. In fact, I was watching this, believe it or not, I was watching this with my 3-year-old daughter, and she liked the action scenes, and there wasn't much blood, and I was like, oh, okay, I guess I could watch this with my daughter. That's cool. And I'm always looking for shows that I could be interested in around my daughter, because the 3-year-old, she's a sponge. She's soaking in everything. And immediately after, I realized why I should not watch this with my daughter. So the final scene of this episode is mind-blowing. It's mind-blowing because you have to remember that I don't have any knowledge about Invincible. I've heard it's a great comic. I've heard just a general idea of, yeah, he's a half alien character, so on and so forth. His father's a superhero, and I kind of got that sort of background, and I tuned it out knowing, hey, I'm going to read that down the road. I don't want to listen to any spoilers. I don't want anything ruined for me. So going into this show, what I certainly did not expect is suddenly to see each member of the Guardians of the Globe, that Justice League analog that we saw at the very beginning of the episode, get this alert that they need to meet back at their Hall of Justice, right? Their watchtower, which is like this interior mountain base, Batcave, essentially. They all meet up. Darkwing, we get the feeling, mainly because this is a Justice League analog, we're like, oh, okay, he must also be the billionaire who's in charge of setting up this base, just like with the Justice League and Bruce Wayne. And they all ask Darkwing immediately, hey, did you call us? He says no. And then Red Rush runs and just slams one of the other members out of the way, the Superman character out of the way, only to see Omni-Man in the process of attacking them. Now, there's some brief little lines that the members of the Guardians of the Globe say to one another that's really important in this scene. They say to each other, while they're being attacked, that Omni-Man must be being controlled because he wouldn't do this. But essentially, Omni-Man attacks all of them and brutally kills all of them. Brutally. The first one being the Flash character, the Red Rush character. Red Rush is way faster than Omni-Man. Omni-Man can move super speed, but he kind of has to time himself in order to catch the Red Rush. And the moment he gets his hands on him, bah! Explodes his head in blood. And there's a long lead-in before he crushes his head, thankfully, because you can see the scene of him grabbing and crushing the head. And that's the point when I pressed pause, changed the channel, and then watched the rest of it on my tablet, so my 3-year-old didn't see somebody get his head exploded. But that's exactly what happened. Crushes it, crushes his head, and then brutally kills Darkwing, and then kills everybody. And it is brutal. Brutal. From he grabs the Wonder Woman character and snaps her head all the way around. He punches a hole through the Superman character's stomach. It is absolutely brutal, and it becomes very clear why this is the equivalent of a rated R film from Amazon. So that's how it ends. It is not what I expected. I mean, I went into it thinking, okay, hey, this is pretty cool. It's pretty neat. I like superhero stories, even stories that are archetypical and told already. I'm still kind of a sucker for that just because I'm a pretty big nerd in general. But that crazy twist at the end, and now the idea of, okay, were they right and Omni-Man's actually being brainwashed? Or is this more of a circumstance that's actually realistic to the Superman origin, which is, do the aliens of this planet that Omni-Man's from really get sent across the galaxy to, just help lower class, lower level, lower intelligent species and protect them? Or do they get sent across the galaxy to dominate and rule lesser species and lesser worlds? Because I'm thinking it's the latter, And I would not be surprised if Omni-Man's strategy to seize power over the planet Earth is to become their premier hero. But there's also the possibility that, one, of course, he could be brainwashed, I guess, but there could be the possibility that this has to do with Mark gaining powers. Omni-Man had said himself that everything changes now that Mark has powers. I don't know. Is he killing off the Guardians of the Globe to give Mark more exposure as a superhero and more opportunity as a superhero, to where he'll be the one that has to respond to the high-level crimes, the high-level villains, and defeat them? Or is he doing this now because something about having an heir with superpowers changes what his role is as far as what he was sent to this planet to do? I don't know. I would guess that he's probably sent to the planet to conquer it. And I would guess that Mark having superpowers is why he's accelerating his plan to conquer. That's a wild guess from the hip for me, not actually based on anything. But I can say that I really enjoyed this first episode, particularly the ending. And now that I'm done with, ending this review with you, I'm really excited to watch the second episode and see where it progresses from here. If you guys have any speculation, any comments, any maybe corrections for me and things that I perceived wrong or that I misinterpreted during my viewing of the show, please comment down below. I'll be sure to review all comments, and anything that I see I'll try and comment on in the next video. And this was my first episode solo review of Invincible. I'm really excited about it moving forward. I can't wait to watch the second and third episode going into the fourth episode coming out this week. And excited to do this again. See you all again. So I'm going to wrap it up here. This is Dweeb Central. I am Mitch. This is Dweeb Reviews Invincible. I'm going to try and bring you guys more of these as I find other shows that I latch on to, and maybe even get Michael and Cole to kind of lead their own independent reviews as well. So thank you guys so much. See you on the next video. Hopefully something exciting happens that we can all talk about and discuss.